Today I'm going to do my speech on the Second Amendment and why the Second Amendment is important. Before I go into the Second Amendment, I'm going to tell you a little story of this lady right here. Her name is Dr. Susanna Garcia-Hupp. She's a doctor because she's a veterinarian. She lives in Texas. A few years back, she went to a cafeteria with her mother and her father, and a gunman came in. Gunman's the wrong term. A murderer, a lunatic, came into a cafeteria with a pistol and started shooting people. Her father charged the man, wanted to save people's lives, charged the man, and he shot him in the chest. The mother, not wanting to leave her husband, this lady's mother, went over to the body, leaned over the body, wanting to pull him out. The lunatic went over the body, pointed the gun at her head. She looked up at him, she looked down, and he killed her, shot her right in the head. Hupp's story is really interesting because she goes in front of the representatives who want to ban our Second Amendment or put more regulations on us. And she went to representatives and was telling her story, telling them about how back then it was a felony to have a concealed weapon. And she used to carry around a pistol everywhere she went. She had to get rid of the pistol because she didn't want to get in trouble. She was being a good citizen and obeying the law. Doing that, she wasn't able to shoot this lunatic. All she had to do was reach in her purse, grab a pistol, and shoot this guy before he killed everybody in the cafe. But she's able to do that, so she's fighting for that. That's one good for the Second Amendment. First of all, we've got to know what the Second Amendment is. The Second Amendment, according to the Constitution, is the basis of citizens of the United States to defend life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness against all threats, foreign and domestic. And the Second Amendment of the Constitution states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What does this mean? Keep a well-regulated militia, a right for people to bear arms. Well-regulated, what does well-regulated mean? Well-regulated means well-functioning. Well-functioning what? Militia. Militia is civilians, not government, not military, civilians, us as civilians, gathering together, protect themselves for their liberty. And that's what they designed it for us to protect ourselves. Thomas Jefferson, one of our forefathers, he had a very awesome quote that's really famous. When governments fear the people, there's liberty. When people fear the government, there's tyranny. This is very important, and I'll go through why that's important. When the government fears us, they have to abide by the laws. But when they take away our weapons, take away our liberty and our freedoms, we won't have a choice, and we start fearing them. That becomes tyranny. This is an example of what happens when the government doesn't fear us anymore. We don't have the right to protect ourselves. Waco, a church, 74 men, women, and children. Under Clinton administration in 1993, April 19th. Under Clinton administration, they massacred 74 men, women, and children with our own military and tanks when they burned our civilians alive to death. Communist China leader Mao Zedong, under Zedong's reign, he killed estimated 65 million of his own Chinese citizens. Here's some pictures of Waco. Here's some tanks going to the buildings. This is more Waco. This is when the building was burning from the tanks. They're injecting tear gas, and it made the fire more hot. Crime rates in other countries. Take away the guns, still the crime's going to be there. Sorry to say, but according to Glenn Beck, in 1997, English Parliament took away the guns of the citizens. 1998 to 2005, the handgun injuries went up 340%. Well, how can that be if they take away the guns from all of us? The government says, well, we take away the guns, or we regulate the guns, it's going to reduce murder, crimes, and everything else, because no one's going to have the means to commit a crime. Well, not necessarily. Australia took away 650,000 weapons in 1996, and the crime went up 45%. There's such a thing called a black market. Today, isn't marijuana, heroin, methamphetamines, all that illegal? Yes. How do they still get it? The black market. No matter what, if they have the money and the means, bad guys are always going to have what they want. Okay, and that's guns. If we don't have the right to protect ourselves, then the bad guys are going to win. Another example is, through the history of the United States, we have never been invaded by another country. Okay? We have 1.5 million servicemen in our country. We have another 80 million gun owners. That makes up for 258 million guns just from gun owners. So if
You have 2 minutes.
So if the country gets invaded, let's say by China, they come over here with 3 to 5 million. Well, they might defeat our 1.5 million guys that we have, our servicemen, but they won't defeat us. And that's another reason for not regulation. If we have regulation on our guns, let's say the government, they're wanting to pass this bill about not having assault rifles, putting a ban on assault rifles. Because they say, well, you got pistols, you got rifles, you don't need assault rifles, they're just murder machines. You don't need them to protect yourself. Well, Dr. Hupp, right, talked to you earlier about when she's a legislator, she made a good point. She said, well, you guys say we don't need assault rifles, but how about that guy in the 90s where he sat on top of his building with an assault rifle, defending his family and his own property from the hundreds of people in the riots in Los Angeles? What about him? If he didn't have that assault rifle, and they banned assault rifles, and he had a bolt-action hunting rifle, do you think he can fend off hundreds of people coming in to harm his family and his property and his personal being? No. Because of the liberty that we have, the Second Amendment, he was able to defend himself and his family. Do you think that Dr. Hupp would have been able to save her family and people in that cafeteria if she had been able to carry a concealed weapon? She's a doctor. She's a good citizen, doesn't have any kind of records, but yet she can't pack a gun because the state legislator said, "Oh, you can't pack a gun, even though it's a Second Amendment. We don't care." So that's the reason why the Second Amendment is so important. In conclusion, as a U.S. citizen, it's your God-given right to protect yourself, your property, and your personal liberty. Stripping this amendment and regulating it to existence will cripple the foundation our government was set upon. Remember Thomas Jefferson's words. Remember his words carefully, what he was saying before. When governments fear the people, there is liberty. When people fear the government, there is tyranny. We don't want to become like China and have all of us massacred because we're not able to defend ourselves. The government did not fear the people, so they didn't fear the consequences of murdering millions of their own people. Waco, our government said, well, let's kill these 74 people, burn them to death, use our own military against our own citizens because we had the power to do so. They weren't very afraid of us. Okay? We didn't make a stand, and it's our vote, it's your vote, that make a stand for the Second Amendment and for our liberties and rights. And if we don't vote correctly, and then it's going to be to the downfall of the Second Amendment, and then a downfall to our United States as we know it. Thank you.
Oh, very good.
And also,